Welcome to the Militia gaming community. I'm Trigger, and this video is all about driving the RSR in Need for Speed Heat. Let's go! Real quick before we get into the video, I just want to mention we have a Discord of over 7,000 members. A lot of those members are looking to group up in Need for Speed Heat, and I know it's harder and harder to find lobbies, so this is a great place to start. And not to mention, we have several level 50 crews that are recruiting that are part of that Discord. So go in, find yourself a level 50 crew, and interact with some of the members there. It's a great time, and we welcome everyone. All right, I can't tell you how many messages I've gotten from newer players asking for this exact video, so it's time to finally make it. In this video, I'm gonna take you from what you think is fast to actually being fast. That is, of course, you practice and master these techniques and tips. If you're a Need for Speed veteran and you know all of these tips, please add the tips of your own to the comments section. My goal with this video is to help players get better at the game, so your tips will be valued for sure. I want to start with the correct build, and this isn't one of my 7 tips, it's just a bonus, but by now you should have seen a few videos featuring the RSR on my channel, but in case you haven't, I'm going to link a couple of videos in the description. The first one is the build video for this car, and the next one is a video explaining Need for Speed Heat's cornering secrets that they don't really tell you when you start playing the game. That will also be in the description. Alright, so tip number 1 is to compare your times on specific races like Sonic with some of the fastest times in the world. I have a list of the unofficial world records for Need for Speed Heat, again link in the description down below, but let's take a look at Sonic for example. The idea here is to find out where you are so that you can determine what you need to work on. The record for Sonic is currently 2 minutes 24 seconds, 0.43. A decent time with the RSR would be somewhere in the low 230s. If you can run it sub 235, then I'd say you probably have a good knowledge of how the car needs to be driven, but maybe not the skills to drive it faster, and you just need a little bit more time practicing to try to get yourself closer to that 230 mark. Tip number 2, understand what's possible. The RSR reacts to user input unlike any other car in the game. Its turning radius is tighter, its grip is better, and its acceleration out of turns is the best. Rarely do you even have to slow down for turns, especially if you stay away from the handbrake. Let's take a look at an example from Goliath, who is easily a top 3 driver in Need for Speed Heat and considered by many to be the GOAT. In this example, I want to take a look at turn 1 in the race Sonic. This turn is visually misleading. As you approach it at over 200 miles per hour, it looks sharper than it actually is, and if you're used to the way other cars handle, you may not realize just how fast you can take this turn. In this clip, Goliath uses every inch of the road, turns in without braking, and takes the turn at over 215 miles per hour. This type of full speed turning is possible on many corners around the map. When I was learning how to race in Heat, this was one of my big breakthrough moments, just understanding what the RSR is actually capable of. Tip number 3, lower your steering sensitivity. If you can't drive the RSR smoothly without shaking it back and forth, your steering sensitivity is too high. Start with -5 steering sensitivity, and if you feel it's too sluggish, then move it up 1 click at a time until you feel comfortable. This will definitely help you keep a better control of your car when dodging traffic at night or when navigating tricky turns during a race. Tip number 4, know what type of turn is required. This is a slightly elevated concept for beginners to grasp, but there are 3 ways to take turns in Need for Speed Heat: full grip, half grip, and full drift. Full grip is when you rail through a turn without taking your finger off the accelerator or touching the brake. There are plenty of turns that can be taken this way. They are usually turns that are either not very sharp, long sweepers, or have some sort of bank to them, which allows you to stay clear of the dirt and the walls. Half gripping is when you prime the drift mechanic just before going into the turn, which will allow your car to turn tighter without completely breaking the tires loose. If you turn too tight during these turns though, you will end up in a full drift. And lastly, some turns will be too sharp and require a full drift. Arian has great examples of each of these turn types. Turn number 1 is a half grip situation for the RSR, while turns 2 and 3 are full grip, and turn 4 all the way at the bottom of the real sharp left-hand turn, is a full drift turn, along with the majority of the S turns going back up the hill. The unique thing about the RSR is that turns that would be full drift turns for many of the other cars in the game can be taken using the RSR as half drift turns, and many of the half drift turns for other cars are easily full grip turns for the RSR. Corners are where the RSR sets itself apart from the rest of the cars in the game, so make sure you know the turns and you will put distance between you and the other racers. Tip number 5, use sport brakes. This tip was originally given to me by Goliath and it makes 100% logical sense. It also applies to some of the other cars in the game, but basically, because the RSR is so good at turns, your brake isn't really used for slowing the car down. Instead, it's used for what Goliath has coined as brake snapping. Brake snapping is when you quickly tap your regular brakes in the middle of a turn in order to increase your turning angle and make a corner that otherwise you wouldn't have made. I explained this concept in more detail in that cornering secrets video that I mentioned earlier. So if you want more information on that technique, make sure that you watch that video. But basically, the reason why you use sport brakes is that they are the least effective at slowing your car down, and the game still recognizes the input as you trying to brake snap your car. The higher tier brakes you have, the more stopping power you'll have, which just slows you down even more when you aren't really looking to slow down by using the brakes. In short, the sport brakes allow you to take the corners faster because they allow you to brake snap without causing over braking. Tip number 6, use a manual gearbox. This one will take some practice, but on average, a manual gearbox is 2 to 3 seconds faster when driven correctly, and particularly with the RSR, it's very helpful for your launch. When you launch from the start of a race, you should immediately shift into third gear. This will help you put those pesky AI in your rearview mirror quickly. Bonus tip for those of you who want to launch better, you need to hold down your NOS button at the beginning of the race. I would advise using at least 3 NOS bottles at the beginning of races, and sometimes 4 depending on if you have a sharp turn that comes up quickly after the start or not. And finally, tip number 7, increase your downforce. This sort of goes hand in hand with the steering sensitivity tip that I mentioned earlier, but it's important to understand, so that's why I wanted to break it down a little further for people who don't know what downforce is. Downforce is the amount of downward pressure the air that passes over your car puts on the body of the car. It is usually adjusted with spoilers, canards, or other body modifications. But since this is a video game and none of the visual modifications affect your performance, Need for Speed allows you to just set the downforce to a specific value. The more downforce you add, the grippier your car will be. So in the RSR's case, it's a very slippery car. It breaks loose in turns very easily, and you need to curb that as much as possible. So make sure your downforce is at +5. Other cars perform differently, so you wouldn't want to have +5 downforce on every car, but for the RSR, it's perfect. Alright guys, that's it for this one, but just remember, my DMs are open. You can send me a DM on Instagram, Twitter, or Discord. I will read and answer, so if you have any questions about the RSR or just Need for Speed Heat in general, feel free to send me a DM. I do not mind answering. This was just meant to be a semi-short but effective RSR tip video. Alright, thank you so much. Shout out to all the Militia subs. I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.